Okay, we're going to call the committees to order and make a few comments, and then we'll roll into business. So, seeing a quorum of PP&J, I call PP&J to order.
And we have a quorum of Public Works and Transportation, and I will call the Public Works meeting to order.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming out tonight. The matter before us tonight is a change order, which is going to allow Mead & Hunt to examine possibilities for going forward with the jail project. This change order is in response to the doubling of the price of the construction to the PSB due to unforeseen circumstances with the existing structure. So I'm going to reiterate that this is a change order only vote on what we're voting on tonight. And we're going to hear from Mead & Hunt. We're going to have discussion and questions from committee members and anyone in the public that's wishing to comment. And in an effort to be as fair as possible, and because we are having a joint meeting with so many members, we're going to ask that all the members of the committee hold your comments to one question. We'll go around as many times as we need, giving everyone a crack at making their comments, and then we'll move on until we run out of questions from anyone wanting answers. So for a number of years, PP&J committee has dealt with the oversight of the jail issue and staff and the sheriff's office, and thank you all for that. So thank you all for that. Once the hard work of that committee was moved forward to the county board, the jail construction work then became a Public Works and Transportation project, and they've been handling that. Public Works and Transportation has provided the oversight for the construction since that time. Because of that, I am now going to hand the meeting off, and Supervisor Nelson, Chair of Public Works, will run the meeting. One more very important item, Supervisor Baird isn't here right now, but it is her birthday tomorrow, so there she is. Happy birthday, Supervisor Baird.
I brought candy.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Cardwell, and welcome to everyone tonight. Just a little more background. As Supervisor McCarville mentioned, once the design planning was taken care of and the contracts for Mead & Hunt and Gilbane were awarded, then at that point oversight moved to the Public Works and Transportation Committee, and those contracts were approved by the board on June 7th of last year. And then in early October, we learned that despite what everybody thought, we weren't able to build up on the public safety building, and that required the first change order that came before Public Works, which was approved on September 9th, and that was to direct Mead & Hunt to investigate, or design and engineering services to investigate the possibility of locating a jail on the West Wilson site adjacent to the public service building. And that was approved by the county board on November 11th. And then within a little over a month, the feedback was, well, this is going to be more costly than we thought it would. And decided that at this point we needed to look at additional design options. And it was decided, there were three that were decided on in December, and that's what's before us now. $188,000 for Mead & Hunt to investigate three design options that are listed on, that are described in lines, I think it's 29 through 53 in the change order that's before us. So maybe what we should do is just take care of, get the motion out of the way, have the presentation from Mead & Hunt, then we do have at least one speaker and one person registering for the project, and then we'll have both committees time for discussion and questions. So I'll entertain a motion, and in this case we go ahead and let the committees move. So we'll start with Public Works. Is there a motion moved by Rip, seconded by Radcliffe? All those in favor say aye.
Right.
Opposed say no.
Wait, because we're voting on it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, that was
Yeah.
Jumped the gun on that one. Okay. I'll entertain a motion from the PPJ committee.
I'll second.
Second, okay. Okay,
All right, so now we'll turn it over to Mead and Hunt, and I suppose if the sheriff and deputy sheriff have anything to say, please chime in.
Yeah, I'll just take one quick second and introduce Chris Hart, who is with Mead and Hunt and representing Mead and Hunt, Potter Lawson, HDR Group. David Way, who normally comes and has been with the project since 2012, is out of town this week and not able to be here. And Chris came on board last year, a year and a half ago, and he'll fill us in, and I'll turn it over to him.
All right. So I think there's a couple of topics that you were interested in today. The first one was just to kind of show you how the South Tower addition cost option came out, take any questions on that, and then talk a little bit more about the 3 design options that we've been asked to study as part of this change order. And then also to just kind of give you a lay of the land for the next few years in terms of what we see the schedule overall. Timeline for the remainder of the project, both on the design side as well as the construction side. I know everybody's anxious to get this project moving into design and construction, so we're here to be your partner for that. So just a quick refresher on the South Addition, the South Tower Addition option as it's been referred to. The idea was that, as you said before, we couldn't add on to the top of the PSB because of the structural issues. So we looked at potentially adding a tower addition, which essentially was about 8 stories, along with 2 sub-stories situated in that back parking lot in the area where the ramp down to the courthouse and the ramp down to the current PSB is. So that's why we had to kind of shape the building as well as we could to take advantage of the available square footage as we came out of the ground there. And we presented this, I believe, back on the 18th of December. And at that point, we told you we were in the processes of doing the cost estimate. And as you're well aware, that cost estimate came back a little bit higher than anticipated, kind of in that 140 to 150 range. And when we talk about overall project cost versus construction cost, what we're really talking about is the difference between essentially hard bid cost, building construction cost, and then the soft costs that go on top of that when you're talking about project cost. So you're talking about things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Some of the things that are loose furnishings that'll have to go into the facility that the sheriff's office and others will need, in addition to professional fees, things that have to go along with the project in order to get it built. Hire a contractor to do the work and all that sort of thing. And so looking at the two parts of that project, the South Addition Tower option, we had about $115 million for the project cost, about $92 million for about 200,000 square feet. Which, if you go back to here, that's kind of what we're talking about here is this essentially the 8 floors with the 2 lower level basement and sub-basement is what's represented in that cost. And then the renovation cost would be the cost, going back here to the PSB, would essentially be the cost to renovate primarily the 4th floor of that for the medical mental health housing areas, and then a little bit on some of the other floors in terms of visitation and support spaces. And some of the reasons that it was increased, obviously prices changed since the original project was estimated back in 2017, mid-2017. We've certainly seen a lot of changes in the marketplace, whether it's steel tariffs or labor and material shortages due to fires, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, a whole myriad of things that were certainly not anticipated that have driven the cost of construction up and continue to do so, unfortunately. Of course, being in the South Addition parking lot, we're in a very tight site downtown, and so that doesn't leave you really any space to build the building. So you have the problem, much like Doyle Square has, where you've got to kind of find areas to do the staging, lay down construction activities in order to be able to bring that building out of the ground. and that's a tricky thing, so that obviously adds significantly to the cost of building on that particular site. Working with the existing utilities and having to rework some of that, and then building those 2 lower floors to support the rest of the floors that were needed, also add to that cost. So that kind of brings us to where we're at in terms of the alternative options. Should I stop and ask questions, or is there anything?
Are there any questions up to this time?
Back on my cost, was the construction cost included in the project cost, and it was just a subcategory?
It's a subcategory of project cost, yeah, that's right.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess not.
Okay, and then for the 3 options, I thought it would be maybe helpful to just kind of walk you through the 3 options that have been communicated to the design team that we've been tasked with looking at. And then what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about what it's going to look like in terms of output, study report, deliverables, if you will, and the documents that we're putting together so that we can be able to show you the 3 different options. And I'll add that all 3 of these options will be compared to the South Addition Tower option. So it will be really looking at 4 options when we're all said and done. This first option is the primarily renovation option, which would be renovating the 6th and 7th floors of the city-county building, maximum medium level housing as it is today. And that would be essentially a full gut and renovation of those floors. And then a partial renovation of the public safety building to house the medical and mental health inmates and services. And then we will be looking at the possibility of maybe adding partial floor to the PSB. But I'll have to say that that's not expected to be a likely outcome based on what we know about the building already. But we'll certainly present that as well. And then also we would be creating a smaller facility for the Huber work release minimum security to essentially replace the Ferris Huber Center as it exists today, so that you could vacate that. Any questions on
Yeah,
that
maybe we
first
should
option?
take questions after each
Yeah.
option. So any questions, Supervisor here?
Sorry, I mean, I feel like I have questions on everything sort of big picture. Should I wait till the end?
Yeah, maybe, yeah, that might be better, yeah. Let's go, if they're a big picture, why don't we wait
Just
until we
trying
get
to-
to all 3?
yeah.
But if anyone has a specific question about this option, a clarification or anything, then I thought we could give time to do that. But if it's big picture, it might be
My
best.
questions are more about a greenfield site in general. so-
Yeah,
Yeah, that one would be at the very end here.
No, there's a greenfield site proposed in all 3 of these.
Correct, that's true.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Good clarification. I was thinking of the big greenfield site when you said that.
I'm
Okay.
thinking of any greenfield site.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right, all 3 of these do involve greenfield sites to some extent. Yep.
Did you have a question? Sure.
Would this be like losing any square footage at all, like for, if there's just the renovation of the 6th and 7th floors for maximum and medium level inmates versus like the original plan, like I don't know if that.
Well, that's really the purpose of the study, and that is the sort of the big picture question that we have to answer in terms of how many beds can we fit into that 6th and 7th floor if we essentially go in and demo everything out, we'll be left with a sort of a clean slate. But we've got an H-shaped configuration, we've got existing elevators, we've got existing mechanical utility shafts in that building that we have to work around. So that is what we'd be looking at as part of the study. So there's quite a bit of work just to look at that one part of this particular option. But that's a really good question. And that's one of the things that we'll be delivering to show you how each of these compare and what the bed counts are and the square footages.
Yes, Supervisor.
Can, are you looking at, or can you stage that?
We are
6th,
looking,
7th floor?
we are looking at the phasing of that
Okay,
because obviously that's a
it's
concern.
It sounded like you're gonna demo everything and then,
Right.
but if we can demo a quarter or whatever, half a floor, I
Yeah.
don't know, I'm just curious.
Yep, and that's part of the study as well, that we have to look at. If we are to try to take over both of those floors, where would those inmates go? That's the big question, right? So maybe we can do half a floor at a time and kind of shift inmates around a little bit. That'll be tricky, the tricky part of that option, for sure. There's the cost of construction, and then there's the cost of, the people are impacted by construction. So you have people on the the 5th floor, now that have offices below that 6th floor. and you're gonna need to get into that ceiling space in order to renovate for drains and things like that above. So, you know, even though you're not necessarily renovating the 5th floor, there's gonna be an impact to the 5th floor as well. All of those things we're trying to take into consideration and make sure that we show the whole picture of each of those options.
Excuse me, it was my understanding that there's a fair amount of asbestos on the 6th and 7th floor. So how can you stage it?
What you do is you isolate an area at a time. For instance, when the mitigation work was going on, there was asbestos to be removed, there was lead paint to be removed. Everybody gets out, it gets all sealed off. The professionals go in there, they do the work, everything is clean, everything is tested, and then you say, okay, now we move to the next spot.
Supervisor Baird?
When I'm looking at the February 1st, 2019 memo from Mead and Hunt, on option 1, it has the E, the cost estimate will include the cost to rehouse inmates during construction. So are you, but I didn't see that mentioned in the other one. Is the phasing and the shifting of the timeline, is that incorporated into
Yes.
all of your assessment?
It will be, and it'll be on the list of deliverables when we get to that point, but yes, is to answer your question.
Yeah, for the 6th and 7th floor then, is there anything that you could foresee or something that would be a showstopper, so to speak, that would say, don't even want to look at it any further because it's just flat out not doable?
Well,
And that's an answer to that piece of this option? Is there something like that that could happen?
I think we're trying to keep the study high level enough that the showstoppers should become apparent pretty quickly once we
Okay.
Start producing the deliverables for this.
That would be good to know.
Yeah.
It's a showstopper.
Yeah, I think it's going to be driven by some of the things we've already touched on, the phasing concerns, where you're going to put inmates while you try to renovate their space. That's certainly the first big one. The second one's going to be cost.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, do you really get the best bang for your buck when you spend all that money and time and energy and headache? You know, for renovating an existing building, all of the other building occupants are going to be affected that aren't necessarily part of the project.
And
Right,
unnecessarily-
so the smaller
Part of the
floors,
town,
not
yeah.
the smaller floors, but the lower floors.
Yeah, right.
Air quality. Right, got it.
There's costs, there's other intangibles, there's pros and cons. I mean, each of these is going to have a list of pros and cons. And as Chris was saying, it's not just, it will be affecting county employees, or county services, city employees, city services.
Right.
Okay, that's so good.
All right, and one of the things that's going to get costed out is if we need to ship people and whether or not the beds are available someplace else. I mean, all along, the thinking was that's about 350 beds in the 6th and 7th floor. So I guess you'd have to phase it, or you'd have to find 350 beds someplace else. All of that, you're gonna,
Yes,
that's all in the deliverables.
It is.
Figure that out.
Supervisor Krause, did you have a question?
Yeah, one thing I was gonna say is the demolition costs may well be prohibitive almost in themselves, which is spooky. If we do seriously look at that, though, I'd like to look at doing a catwalk from Public Safety Building over to 6th and 7th floor above Carroll Street.
Any other questions, then, or are we ready to move on to option 2?
yeah, we've been hesitating to number them because there's been so many numbers and
We already have
previous
options
options.
1 through 6.
I think we need like animal caricatures or something. So the next one is the renovation of the PSB and then a larger greenfield option, which would essentially consist of the partial renovation to house the Huber work release inmates, and then again vacating the Ferris Huber Center, and then creating a greenfield site for housing the maximum medium level inmates and the medical mental health services that would be coming out of CCB. And then vacating the 6th and 7th floors of the CCB. So this option really gets you out of Ferris and CCB is what this essentially does. The combination of a building at a greenfield site and then renovation to the PSB. Yeah.
Supervisor Beard.
Thanks. On this one, and maybe on all three of these, there's a delineation specifically on the third point down about medical and mental health housing. So the idea that the medical and mental health housing will be in one location. So what happens when individuals in the other location need medical and mental health housing? Is there going to be an analysis then of creating sort of a sub or mini in all of these perhaps?
Yes.
That we're going to make sure that resources are available in
Both.
all locations, both
Yes.
locations. So on some level, can you help delineate and talk about in the final report sort of duplication a little bit of,
Mhm.
right? You
Yes.
need to be prepared for the maximum number of people with mental health needs in both locations, even if the majority of them are in one place or another. Does that seem, that's part
Yes.
of your analysis?
It is.
Which is also a staff driver because it'll increase staffing.
To have multiple locations.
Yes.
Because you gotta have medical and mental health folks here, you gotta have medical and mental health folks there. And
Right.
it will,
All their equipment. all
It's
their
not different than
facilities.
where we are now,
correct.
which is not financially great on the operating side. Thank you.
Yeah, then maybe it'll help to kind of explain what one of the deliverables that we'll have is essentially I would call it departmental blocking plan, which will have blocks of space, and it'll say medical, mental health, or, human work release, or program space. And so you'll be able to kind of tell which of the options have duplication of some of these things pretty quickly. But there'll also be a written narrative that will cover all these topics that we're.
It will be in the report.
Right.
Thank you.
Supervisor Powell.
Especially in looking at this one, I want to point out future operating costs of transporting people back and forth for court.
All of these.
I would like a strong focus on who are we going to need to transport back and forth to court, and can we make space for them here, even if it's more temporary facilities that people move in and out of. So that's important to me. The other question that I had on this one is, are we considering using the surface lot and building up the surface lot, at least in part? Or should we?
That is not part of consideration right now. You mean the back parking lot?
Yep, can we keep an eye on that as a potential?
It's not it's not spelled out in any of the options right now.
I know, that's why I'm bringing it up.
And what do you want to accomplish in that addition?
Well, one of the things when we initially had to cut it down for cost was we ended up having to cut out a lot of the programming space. The big nasty when we had to move into that surface lot was we were reserving that surface lot for potential expansion to add back that programming space. I would like to continue looking at being able to add or increase potential programming space as we look at things.
That'll challenge us in this change order, because right now what we're trying to do is to replicate the program that was approved for the top of the PSB, which is the same program that was approved for the back of the PSB. And so the program in all of these, like Chris said, 4 options really, the South Edition, and then these 3 new options will be the same. But if you're saying in this one you want to use part of the back parking lot to build additional program space, then our programs won't be like for all of the options. And so we won't be comparing like things.
Well, what I would like to do is continue to look at what we had as the idealistic needs that we had to start paring apart and cut down to size. I would like to look at what might be possible as far as the fluff that we had to cut out, because some of that fluff is really important. If it's possible, especially if we're looking at greenfield space, to add some of that back, I would love to be able to do that.
I think your ask is most appropriate for the complete greenfield site, and I think you'll get that explanation.
Mhm. But just in thinking
But I
about
think it
using that
very
surface
much
lot.
complicates this because, you know, as the chief said, it's not apples and apples.
Mhm.
Now we're comparing apples and grapefruits and oranges.
Mhm. Or we're
It's
looking
hard to
at
make an
the
educated decision.
the ideal scenario versus the cut-down version that we had to settle for last time. If it's possible to bring back some of that ideal, I would like to.
Yes, Supervisor Beer?
I just wanted to mention this, okay, to mention it, is that, and maybe some clarification from the committee chairs. I feel like the conversation tonight, although all these conversations are important and certainly should not be limited in any way, and these are where committee work should be done in committee, but I feel like my understanding with the conversation tonight is discussing and approving the change order, and although I'm always interested in talking about the details were approved by the full county board, and I just wanted an understanding of, is that scope before us, or the scope is the same? This is simply a approval for additional studies to implement that
Exactly,
scope.
right. I mean, the contract we approved in June for $4 million plus with Mead and Hunt was for a specific agreement, a specific set of services. The first change order was for additional services spelled out as far as looking at the site, the West Wilson site next to the public service building. And then this is also for additional services. It doesn't change anything in the original plan, the original contract. It's additional services to look at 3 other options. So are you asking that we sort of focus on
Well,
that? And
I just want a clarification
Yeah,
for myself.
no.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
not everyone got what they wanted and had their
Right.
vision, achieved. We all get that. We've all been on the county board. We've all won our votes and lost our votes. But so I just wanted clarification that, debates should always continue. But that what's actually before us tonight is not a debate over the scope, but a debate over
the 3, yeah, and I would think
whether we
changing the
approve-
scope would change, I would think, the dollar amount of the change order. Then we'd
I mean, I would
end up
think that
with
would-
change order number 3.
And that's not
right
what,
away.
and that's
Yeah,
not what's before
yeah,
us.
so I think, so
Okay.
maybe we should, you're right, we should focus on
I,
what's before us as far as the 3 options.
I wasn't trying to stop anyone, I was
Yeah.
just wanting clarification in my mind.
Okay,
And I tried to
no,
silence anybody's comments.
Yeah,
Thank you.
If I could respond to that.
okay,
Um,
and then,
I don't feel real bad about bringing these things up because I feel like in many ways, we're looking at a clean slate. We're giving them new marching orders.
well, we're not really looking at a clean slate. We've asked them to look at 3 specific options. We're not dealing with the original contract. This is an add-on. So that's not what this discussion is about tonight.
But I still want to come out in the end with the best possible product.
Mhm.
And if we can expand on the given parameters to be able to get the best possible product, I would like to give
But that
them
will
the
have to be
ability
for
to
another time,
consider
because that's
that.
not on our agenda tonight. The agenda is simply the change order. And it's pretty clear what the change order is about.
Could we table and finish going through the options
But I
and maybe
think-
table a larger
yeah.
discussion?
Yeah. Supervisor, did you want to?
Yes, I did. I think the questions that Dorothy Krause has asked, I think, are extremely helpful to me in understanding what it is we're here to debate. The purpose of committee work under the principles that we've always operated on in this county board is to do committee work in committee. And I think an effort to limit what we can talk about in this committee, I think what Dorothy is asking is absolutely spot on. And I strongly do not support the idea of limiting what we can talk about at this committee, so long as it relates in some way to the jail construction, because this is to some degree a proposal for a clean slate. So I guess want to push back against this idea that there are certain topics related to the jail construction that we're not allowed to talk about tonight, because I find what you're saying to be incredibly useful, and I hope you continue to ask those questions. They may be tough questions, but I hope this continues. So I just wanted to make that clear.
But the key point is that, what we're voting on is, moving forward on the three options, approving that meeting hunt, investigate, provide with design and engineering services for the three options that they're reviewing versus E. It's fine to have a discussion, but I think we need to stay focused, and otherwise we just get too far afield and lose the reason why we are particularly having this specific joint meeting. So with that, any other questions on phase 2? Or the second option about, let's move on to the full greenfield option now.
So I think the next one's a little bit easier to get your head around in terms of what it means, essentially getting out of all three current jail locations, Ferris Center, CCB, and the PSB, and building a new facility at a greenfield site. Is essentially what we're talking about. One location for all inmates, for all medical, mental health, Hebrew workers. And then that would give you the option to either sell or repurpose the PSB and then vacate the other facilities. The one thing that would be a little bit tricky about this in terms of if you were to sell the PSB site is that you would have to retain a little bit of it in order to build some sort of new Sally Port entrance for the courthouse, for inmates to be able to go back and forth from this greenfield site location to the courthouse, because it doesn't currently have a Sally Port for inmates to come and go from.
Could you sort of define Sally Port?
Essentially what you have on the corner of the PSB now, where you pull into that garage and then pull out again, that's what we're talking about.
Could you show us on one
Sure.
of those drawings exactly how
Yep,
that would be
absolutely.
located?
I'm trying to think. I might.
Why is it called the Sally Port?
Let me go to, just a second.
Yeah.
Some term from way, way back that nobody quite remembers.
Oh, I do have it, just a second.
I did look it up, but I didn't like the answer I got. So,
What was the answer you got?
a gate.
Oh, okay.
Well, Sallyport, it goes back to the times of like medieval times with the castle kind of thing. That's where it actually comes from, the terminology. It's kind of like a moat kind of thing. Yeah.
You can use your mouse to.
Got a plan here. So essentially right now, where you come in, and there's a little garage right in here. I think you come in this side and then you leave out this side. So this little portion of the building has a garage, essentially it's an indoor garage, much like you'd have in your house. A little bit bigger, of course. It's sized so that you can actually bring a large bus vehicle through here. So that's essentially where it is now, kind of up in this area.
So how much square footage would that involve?
We're probably talking a couple thousand square feet.
Oh.
It's not huge. Just trying to see if I think I might have a first floor. Yeah, there it is. It's this space that you see. This space right here.
Okay.
So it's probably, as I look at that right there, it's probably 3,000 square feet. So that's essentially what the greenfield option would entail. And some of the things that we outlined in our scope of services, some of the information will be provided by others, just to be clear on that. And that it's very, very clearly spelled out in the change order in terms of who's providing what information. Some things we're better equipped to provide, and other things you all are better, sheriff's office is better equipped to provide. But these are the things that'll be coming out of this study. And if you gave me another week or two, I'd probably get you some actual examples of these deliverables. But if you think of a spreadsheet essentially for that top item, which is going to have each option kind of across the top, and then it'll have a summary of the different kinds of square footages by program space, housing space, support space. And then we'll have another similar summary for the bed count for each of the options. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have essentially, much like the plans that you were just seeing up on the screen, and we've been showing you in the last presentation, blocking plans that show each of the spaces for each of the options. Whether, in some cases, it's just sort of an idealized, if you were to drop it onto a new site, it might look something like this. It wouldn't necessarily be the actual design. It's really just a diagram to show you about how big the space would be in terms of blocks. And then the cost estimates will be involved working with Gildane, who's hiring, I believe, Concord to do the cost estimate part of this effort. And that's going to be primarily, it's going to be a per square foot basis. So we're going to give them drawings and some narrative that shows them this is the kind of work that's happening on each of the buildings and each of the floors. They're going to look at that and they're going to add, certain percentages and estimations by square foot cost, dollar per square foot cost, to get to an estimate for each option, so that in the end you can kind of see how they all add up. And then we also have another consultant who the sheriff's office has been working with on the South Addition option to update the staffing plan. He's going to take that information and then create a staffing plan for each of the three new options. So that's essentially, sort of big picture wise, what we're being tasked to produce.
I have a question about the design schedule. Does
Sure.
that include timeline beyond the design timeline?
So the timeline I'm going to show you, if you want to jump there, I can jump there, or we can take questions on the
I just wanted to
study.
clarify what you mean by design schedule. Is that just design or also construction?
Just design time to get to a set of working drawings that can be bid, drawings and specifications.
So that's not looking at the differences in the options for the construction?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put a timeline on all of this because the options may get phased differently. So if you think about this, this would be, say essentially this would be sort of the greenfield option, maybe that's the best way to put it. This was kind of based around the similar durations that we had for the previous South Addition option, as well as the vertical expansion option. So we didn't really change the durations for the most part. We didn't try to adapt to each of the options. Some of the options, like that first option, will get stretched out much further because of the phasing that we talked about before that would have to happen. So that's why when I go to this slide, I say start renovations ? And I say the dates may vary based on the design option, because if any of the dates are going to vary a lot more, it's going to be these dates, not so much these dates. If we can get an answer from the county and you all, and start on the schematic design documents in May, realistically, we should be ready to go out for bidding, sometime middle spring, summer of next year.
So that started in January, but the change order won't go through the county board until March, right? So this is already pushed back 3 months? So got January to April.
Right now, we're on target to be able to be ready to present the cost estimate and the deliverables kind of mid-April.
Even with the March approval of the board?
Mhm.
So we're just starting ahead of time, kind of anticipating an approval of the change order?
Supervisor Britt?
Go back just a little bit. How detailed is some of this stuff going to be?
It's going to be high level.
Because you've got, say, unless we leave the 6th and 7th floor vacant forever, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, we're going to have to demo with somebody anyway. So will we have an idea of what it's going to cost to demo it?
Mhm.
Broken out?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just didn't want one big number and say, here it is.
Supervisor?
I don't think we ever really got up to the all greenfield site section. Did we talk about that and I missed it? Okay.
Although we've been bouncing around.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, one question that I had, particularly for that one, we talk about county-owned property. Do we have a sense of what properties we have available of an appropriate size for that? And question related to that is transportation, particularly for Huber people.
We don't have any county properties that are specifically designated for this project yet. There's a lot of properties.
Have we looked at the range of, I mean, we know what property we own. We probably have a sense of how big it would need to be. So have we,
That is one of the things that this study will help define, because essentially for the greenfield options, we're trying to look at a single-story option, so that essentially that'll give you the sort of the maximum footprint, and then we're also trying to estimate number of parking spaces. So that should give you at least a area in terms of acreage that you might need for a site. So that will help inform that next step in the process, which is, okay, now we know it's about this big, and let's look at the property that's available. But that's not really part of this study at the present time.
my question probably to the facilities folks is, do we know what properties there are available that might be suitable? Or would we end up having to look at buying property?
I think either of those options are possible. I believe the Department of Administration is closer to knowing what properties we own that may be viable, but it's not something I'm looking into at this point.
Supervisor Rice?
But it says in line 54, county-owned or purchased. So are we gonna look at the county-owned first and then, or is the word "or purchased" not supposed to be here?
I think it just means the greenfield site. They're not determining right now, this is the site. They're saying if you go to a greenfield site,
Okay.
you need 22 acres to do it, or 40, I don't know what the number is. But you need this number of acres, and then that will be determined later.
So they're not gonna worry about purchase price of property as needed?
Correct, that's not part of this to figure in that cost.
Supervisor Beer?
That's a big number for us to think about.
So I actually, my notes and my thought process are very similar to what Supervisor Kraus is just asking. And so I wanted to ask, when you're incorporating into this numbers, I get that you're not going to say where it's going to be. We don't know yet. But, you know, the county board considered a greenfield site before and did not support that. I understand why we're doing this again and that people need more options, and I appreciate that. But I have huge concerns with the greenfield site, and I wanted to see if it's possible how these costs can be incorporated, or if they can't, it's helpful to know that, because I want to go out and find these numbers. The Huber question is spot on. I mean, the idea of Huber individuals being somewhere that we don't know yet, and I get that you don't know where this greenfield site is, but Huber doesn't work if you don't have access to Madison Metro. Madison, right now, the current Huber site, you get the bus and you go straight to the south transfer point, and from there you have options. If the new site is somewhere that is not Madison Metro accessible, that's a problem. I don't understand how Huber is successful, and I don't want to say no, because that's not at the stage that we're at. At least, in my opinion, I feel like, okay, people want options. Let's look at options, but part of me wants to somehow see then that this option takes into account that we're going to have to shuttle every Huber inmate to the nearest transfer point, and we're going to have, you know, a shuttle bus every 10 minutes, or something to acknowledge that this just doesn't work unless you have access to Madison Metro. And as much as also I'd love to have the answer that, well, then we'll just pay Madison Metro some money to buy us a bus route, I know it doesn't work that easily. And I know that they're at capacity and they can't buy more buses because the bus barn is oversized. So I just want to make sure, I want to know if numbers like that are being considered, because I don't want us to make the mistake of if we're looking at it from a numbers perspective to say, oh, this is X million dollars less, let's go with it for that purpose. When in the end, not only do I think I would argue it won't be successful, but for it to be successful, we're going to have to provide some sort of shuttle service. So, sorry to go on. So my question is, will that be a number that's incorporated into what you're doing? Or if it's not, that's good to know, because then Supervisor Krause, if you want to team up with me or anybody else, I want to go and find out the answer to these numbers, because that's a big deal.
Well, what I can answer from Mead and Hunt's perspective in terms of what we've been asked to do is we won't be providing those numbers at this juncture as part of this particular study, but we will be providing a narrative which would identify that those are questions that need to be answered upon further consideration of that option.
I mean, and that's not just a Huber inmate thing, that's all inmates. If individuals are not near the courthouse, then we have to talk about access to the courthouse. But if they're not downtown and centrally located, we're talking about access to their individual family members, access to their attorneys who are downtown and centrally located, because all criminal defense attorneys are used to being in court all the time, and they're located near the courthouse. And just all these factors, besides the fact that as a City of Madison resident, I'm not interested in overtaxing the City of Madison, which is the largest user of the Dane County Jail, where the idea that this Greenfield site could be somewhere very far away. I just want to make sure we're having an understanding of what the costs actually are, should the county board seriously consider something that is just not centrally located.
Supervisor Keeper?
How many acres do you need for the Greenfield site?
Don't know the answer to that yet.
When I look at the bullet points, I don't see determining the number of acreage in the bullet points, but is that one of the things?
We can
that's
translate
in
the
it?
square footage to acreage. That's easy enough to do. We can make a note to do that.
So is one of the products that you'd be producing as part of this study determining the acreage, not just the square footage of the building, but the acreage of the site? Would that be something that would be determined?
I think what we'll provide is, we'll provide a footprint in terms of square footage of a building and square footage of a parking lot, and then we could draw a box around that. We can say this box represents X number of acres. That's pretty easy to do on the drawing. That's just a note to add, and we can add that in the narrative. And then that'll inform the next evolution of this selection and study process. Obviously, there's more detailed work to do once we decide on where the project is going to go.
So when you talk about so-called ballpark estimate, and I don't know how many acres are in a ballpark, but I'm sure someone's figured that out. I know the chief deputy cited the number 22 acres. Do you think 22 acres is within the ballpark of the
When I
number
said
of
22, I said I don't know any.
Okay, but you use 22 as an example. I'm just trying to get a
And then I
sense.
said 42.
42. Would either 22 or 42 be within the ballpark?
I don't know yet. I don't know
Okay.
yet, because we haven't finished the sizing of the largest greenfield option. So
I like 84.
So, but you wouldn't rule out 20 or 40 or even 80? Possible?
I don't know.
Don't know until we see the
Okay.
size of the footprint.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, if I had an idea, I would certainly tell you, but we're
Okay.
just not there yet.
But you wouldn't rule out any of those options in terms of 20, 40, or 80 acres?
I guess what I'm saying is I don't know what answer to tell you right now until we size the footprint.
Okay.
Supervisor Cardinal?
Yeah, just more of a comment or two, but I think that's what we're trying to get to, with the change order, is to say, here's, a number of options, and it may be crystal clear just at that point that we go, whoa, that's just so far out of the ballpark, don't chase it down, we don't care how many acres it would take. Maybe that, the 150 million on the one that brought us to ask for the change order winds up still being the best plan out there. But I think that's really kind of where we're going to, and that change order is going to get us there. And then if it does become crystal clear, or maybe close, there's a couple that are close, then we beat it up some more. But that's kind of what I'm seeing, is that change order is really gonna put some more borders around it, put some price tags on it to say, yeah, that kind of looks like the direction we need to head. So that's just what I wanted to throw out there.
Okay, it's Supervisor Dana.
You mentioned that these were the three options that you were tasked with studying. Where did that dictate come from? About
That
which
came from the county and the sheriff's office,
sheriff's
with their
department?
conversations with,
Yeah, it was a directive from the county exec, the county board chair, and the committee chairs. It was not the sheriff's office desire to do these three.
Did the sheriff's office have different desire?
See a project come to fruition.
Question about the cost estimates. So earlier in this presentation, you had mentioned there were unanticipated environmental and market trends for
Mhm.
changes in cost. Can you talk about how you're proactively planning for potential changes in those cost estimates, and whether the ones that we're being presented with soon
Sure.
will have those items in mind?
Yeah, the way we do that when we cost estimate projects is we use contingencies and we use escalation percentages. And what we do is we forecast, so if a project's going to start, say, at the beginning of 2019, and it's going to be a 2-year project, we'll escalate the cost of construction to the midpoint, so essentially a year out, so that you're not trying to, underestimate the actual bid number, because as you know, through the life of a project that's 2 years long, labor 1 year would be a little bit higher than next, because everybody's, it goes up just a little bit, so that's how we handle that with percentages.
Okay, at this point, we do have one person wishing to speak and one person who registered. Should we go ahead with that and then get to the discussing matter at hand? Is everybody comfortable with that? Sure. Okay. Sure. And also that we do have some supervisors here, Supervisor Chawla, Wegleitner. Is that, you're welcome to join the discussion if you wish. So we have Sister Fran Hoffman wishing to speak in opposition, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm wearing my Moses shirt, but I'm really speaking more for myself, although I think all of us are rather frustrated and with, change again, and we were hoping for, as it were, a smaller jail, and that's not real clear that that's what we're going to have. We were thinking that we'd rather see money put into treatment for people before they ever get to the point of being booked into jail. And it's sometimes the idea of a crisis restoration center that would take someone who's in crisis and help to stabilize that person. And, we've got this Miramont in the future as maybe even a possibility. We don't know, but we're thinking of other ways of helping people before they get to jail, and then also about the fact of length of stay in jail. Couldn't there be other options, other procedures in place? So it just seems to me anyway, that there could be more imagination looking at what could be done. Have we looked at other models in the country of how this is being done? We don't want just a psychiatric hospital, jail, whatever, because we don't know how people inside are really going to be under, the idea that they're in a jail, or are they being treated? So there's just lots of questions that we have, and that I have, I should say, but come from some of the principles of treatment rather than incarceration. I guess that's basically what I wanted to say.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker?
I have a question.
Yes, Supervisor Cooper.
For me?
Yes. Thank you for coming. It's Sister
Fran.
Thank you for coming, Sister Fran. So just imagine, I'm just trying to get at what you're proposing with regard to the actual jail construction project that's in front of us right now. Like, imagine we fully funded the treatment things that you're talking about. Just imagine that's been funded. What would you then want to do, if anything, with regard to the physical plant at the jail? Would you be in favor of just keeping the jail as it is, or building at 115 West Doty, or building a greenfield, or what is it you would want to do with that part of it?
Well, I know that there has to be access, you brought that's been mentioned. I guess I'm just thinking that, in terms of a smaller jail, there has to be a jail, understood, and for, violent criminals mostly, but isn't there a way to deal with those on Huber, or those who are there for, shall we say, minor incidents or whatever? I don't want to sound like this is pie in the sky, but I think there are other ways of doing things, and I don't know if we're talking about best practices or not. I don't think we should be doing the same old thing again that we have been doing, and I am not, I'm not an expert on criminal justice and construction of jails, but I just seems to me that there are better ways, and maybe more resources in the community could be used somehow. I know that would involve transportation and so on too, but I just wanted to present that because I feel frustrated, as I'm sure you would all do too.
Thank you. Supervisor Heidi Whiteleitner wishes to speak in opposition.
Yes. Well, this is an interesting discussion, and I thank you all for your thoughtfulness, and the supervisors who are asking, I think, really good questions. And we have new supervisors here considering this project since the initial jail consolidation project was approved in the 2018 capital budget. So I think it's really important that these conversations happen again, and now that we're at the place that we're at, we're asking, what is it that we really want, and what is it that really makes sense? $186,000 for more studying of options that mostly don't sound good or realistic to anyone doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially because of all the good work we've been doing on criminal justice reform that's unfinished. And some of that was just mentioned, and the objectives of trying to keep people with mental health issues out of the jail. First point, though, is this is a huge public project, major public cost, major public interest, and I know you had difficulty trying to get this meeting scheduled, but we're meeting on election night in the city of Madison, and I think there are people that probably want to be here that probably would like to, well, they might be able to stream it at some point thanks to Private Citizen, but I don't think it's appropriate to be voting on this tonight when there are many people who can't participate because they're working the polls or because they're trying to get to the polls. So I would ask that you either refer this or vote this down tonight. And I also want to say that when we debated the project in the 2018 budget process, a lot of things, a lot of narrative was put in about the important criminal justice reform efforts underway. And also money was put in for $100,000 for, or I think maybe 125 with a specific equity component to study our mental health system. And that RFP, now that it's late February 2019, is still under evaluation. It's actually been sent out for RFP multiple times. We don't even have a resolution before us to start that study process. So, and then a year ago, we got a report on a sequential intercept model about diverting people with mental health issues at various phases in the process. Really important work, interesting, helpful report, and supposedly all hands are on deck to do this. But instead of, waiting for this mental health study,
30 seconds, then you want to?
I'll try to wrap up. Instead of, trying to, double down and look at that model and that report and look at this mental health study and actually study a crisis restoration center, we're just going to, move forward ahead and keep changing this contract and have studies that don't even give us the full cost of operations. I just really wonder, what is this change order? What is this study really about? Is this really about what we want, or is this some kind of political game that's being played? And we know that $150 million jail was not acceptable to a prior county board, and I would think it would be difficult with this county board too. Why don't we think about the mental health system and diverting more people from jail, and getting the data we need that sequential intercept model says we absolutely need to fully evaluate this before we're investing this kind of money at this time. I don't think the change order is the appropriate way to do this. I think we need to have a bigger community conversation. I think we need to have really look at our various options, and we absolutely need to get important data on the mental health impacts on our criminal justice system, and we don't have that now, and it doesn't seem very urgent because the RFP is still under evaluation. So,
okay, well, thank you, Heidi.
Question.
Yes, Supervisor.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, first of all, thank you so much for being here, even though you and I have somewhat different perspectives on the jail. I so very much value your input because I find it so valuable. And I would ask you the same question I asked Sister Francis, which is, assuming you were to get the mental health study RFP'd and done and all that input and the other things you asked for, assuming that all were to happen, what would you want to do with the proposal that's before us tonight in terms of building the physical structure or not building a physical structure? Just on that part of it, assuming you got everything else paid for from the treatment and everything, what would you want to do with the physical structure, if anything?
That's a fair and good question. I think we need to look at where renovations are appropriate, but we also really need to look at keeping people with mental health issues out of the jail. Instead of making a mental health facility in the jail, as Sister Fran was talking about, what about a community-based mental health center or multiple mental health centers? We know underway in Middleton, I know because I was reading Paul's blog recently, they've broken ground on the new psychiatric hospital out there, and that will have an impact on the number of beds that we can hospitalize people in the community. Now, I'd like to have a more a less intense intervention than hospitalization, but we need a spectrum of services. So I would like to see us reduce the number of beds, look at more modest renovations, but keep people who are sick out of jail and treated in the community.
Thank you so much.
Other questions? And then we finally have Paul Seaman, who wishes to register in support.
Is it right if I speak?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Court counsel said I didn't have to fill out a form.
Oh, well, if that's fine with me.
Thanks.
But you'll still just get the 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'll be brief. All right, so first off, I want to thank the committee chairs, staff, and all the committee members for being here. My brain is a little mushy. I'm a poll worker, so I've been up since 5 working at the polls, so I'll be brief. I'll echo a lot of the points that Supervisor Weigleitner had, and I want to thank the committee here for asking a lot of insightful questions. In a prior life, I ran a consulting company myself, and although it was in IT, one of the things that happened is when a project got to a point where it hit a critical milestone of errors, us as a consulting company, we would often eat some of those costs to get back on board. As we look at this change order right here, I think $186,000 in the purview of a larger project and the millions that have been spent, I think it would be good for the taxpayers if some of this work was absorbed by our consulting company. I think if we looked at this even outside the politics of the jail, it looks like some of this work has already been done. Supervisor Danner pointed to the schedule that was from January 2019 to April 2019. So I think there was the assumption that this change order would pass. So I would encourage the committee to not allow any of the work that's already been done to be backbilled. And I would also encourage the committee to look at what costs we can recover. So as this issue is getting studied and as these options are getting studied, maybe not all of that should be funded by the taxpayers, and some of that due to some of the, the issues that we've seen with the project and the money that's already been spent, see if we can recover some of those funds. The last thing I just want to emphasize here is, always with challenges come opportunity, and I think we've seen across the country this concept of mental health crisis centers and pulling, separating the law enforcement context from a public health context. I've been working with many counties and jurisdictions across the country, and we've seen this added emphasis on how the criminal justice system has been inundated with public health concerns, and as we move to separate those concerns, we're able to treat the criminal justice issues and the public health issues better. So as we go forward, it looks like we might have an option to use the public safety building as a mental health crisis center, and I implore the committees here to see if we can further look into that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Supervisor Kiefer.
So what we're going to have to vote on in a committee in hopefully a few minutes is this change order, and it sounds like what you're saying is Mead and Hunt should not be billing us for it. But that's not what we're voting on tonight about that question. We can't vote on that tonight. What are you actually asking us to do in terms of the vote tonight?
I'm saying that if there's work that's already been done towards this change order, that's been done before the change order has been approved, I don't think that work should be billed, the county should be billed for that work. So, as you know, I'm new to the county board. I was bringing up this point in the context of more of my business experience and working with consulting companies. But, I mean, I think it's appropriate to ask Mead and Hunt, is this $186,000? Is there some way they could work with us on the price? Because I think usually in a situation like this where you have a long-standing working relationship with a contractor who's probably going to get a lot of additional work, especially if we look at some of the figures that have been thrown around, it might be appropriate in this situation to keep the project going and to show some good faith to see if that expenditure really needs to be taken by the taxpayers.
Can I ask a question of Mead and Hunt?
Was that?
Can I ask a question of Mead and Hunt?
Sure.
So what's the Mead and Hunt response to that? He's saying that you shouldn't bill for this work because you've already done it. What's your response?
I would, Mead and Hunt can answer for themselves, but I would tell you this, that since 2012, Mead and Hunt, Potter, Lawson now, and HDR have been doing a lot of work. And every time that we, the county, change our mind about something or want some additional information, that's sort of always our response is, well, at the end of the day, it's going to be a really big project and you'll make significant money, so you should just eat this cost, or your cost should be really lowball so that, we can get this work done. And eventually they have to look at their business and go, we really have to stay in business. And, this has been 6 years in the making. And every time that you have, and it's not usually change orders, but it's been studies over the years, every time we've said to them, and, the big payday's coming soon or someday, so, we really need you to keep your costs down this time. Eventually, they just can't stay in business doing that kind of stuff.
Other questions?
Yeah, I would have to defer to Dave on that one. Dave Way, I can't speak for Dave on that one.
Okay.
Well, I guess this is a question directed now to the speaker, or to Yogesh. I also share the frustration with Mead and Hunt. Mead and Hunt came in to this committee and told us that they would be able to do this south tower for the same cost as building the addition on top of the jail, and that was just a couple months ago.
No, they did not.
And
No, absolutely
and
not.
now we're back saying that it is double the cost.
That's just false information.
Well, that's what I heard, and I was there.
Well, no, that's
Wrong
not
information.
what I heard.
Well, I was at the committee meeting, and that's exactly the message that I got.
No, that was not said, sorry.
Well, in any event, I would say I would share the frustration with Mead and Hunt, and I guess, I don't know how you can answer the question, but I think.
I guess my answer, I'll give you a simple answer. Sometimes if I perceive a customer service issue in my life and I'm dealing with something, I ask, hey, can you work with me here? So I would say maybe the committee, maybe in an informal way, can say, hey, can you work with us?
Okay, other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess that brings us to discussion of the change order. I don't know if we just want to do a round robin around the table, or just raise with the hand, or how do you want to do this?
Maybe one at a time, just come around
Yeah,
and see if
should we
they
do
have a
that?
question, fine, if
Yeah.
they don't, we'll go to the next.
Yes.
Question?
So if we don't approve the change order tonight, what's the next step? What happens after that?
That's a good question. Well, we don't study further options, and I guess then somebody has to either say that the project is done, or somebody would have to introduce amendment to the budget to approve the difference between the 76 million and the 140 to 150 million.
My question is for Sheriff Mahoney. Do you, what option, like, do you like the current option with the side tower? Is that your preference? I mean, my preference was on top of the public safety building, I mean, but we aren't there anymore. So what are you thinking?
My option is a decision made by the collective body to move forward and end the life and safety risks that are occurring every day on the top 2 floors of this building. That's my desire.
I'm going to continue on with what the sheriff just said. Roughly every day, 40 people are in solitary confinement somewhere in our system. And those people should not be in solitary confinement. And if we don't move forward and have a decision soon, we're going to continue the same pattern that we have had for years and years and years. The problem is, it's all documented. Everybody knows, it's everywhere, how unsafe the 6th and 7th floor is. And we had a suicide recently. We have all kinds of problems up there. And I am all for all of the reform of the criminal justice system that the county board has been pushing for years. We're making a little bit of progress, but it's slow. But in the meantime, people are suffering. And every single time we have a tour and we go up there, not every time, but most of the time, you see for yourself people in solitary confinement suffering. They're yelling. It's generally women. And we had a tour right after the April election for some of you new supervisors. And I mean, it just breaks my heart what's going on up there. And so if we don't move forward with this, we're never going to get a decision, and the unsafe and terrible conditions that we are having right here in Dane County are going to continue.
The south tower of each of these proposals include the 91-bed reduction that we agreed upon and solve the issues of medical and mental health housing, programming space that Supervisor Krause has spoke a concern about. And you asked my desire. My desire is that we do something. Because as Supervisor Rusk touched on, every day that we don't, we're accepting the fact that people do not have adequate medical housing, adequate mental health housing, and that we are permitting and accepting people housed in solitary confinement. We talked about ending solitary confinement, but we keep pushing this wheelbarrow down the road. And every day that we don't act, we increase our we don't increase. Our liability is as high as it's gonna be. And we don't address solitary confinement and lack of programs.
The local hospitals will not take them, and at best, they end up at Winnebago. And if you've ever been to Winnebago, it's a horrible place.
I think we gotta look at these things. I'm really skeptical on the last option of a greenfield space. I probably know where more county land is than anybody else in the room here. And I've been trying to think of, there's a couple places we own, the Clay Barrow site out in Cottage Grove, and none of these are anywhere near bus routes. There's land adjacent to the city right now. I believe it's going for $90,000 an acre. If you want to get even closer with a bus route, you're going to be way more than that, I'm sure. So it's going to be almost impossible, unless I guess we could establish a shuttle service or something. But that's the one that bothers me, because I think we're wasting our time on that one. So I'm hoping that at that point they look briefly at that one and see how many problems there are with it, and concentrate on the other two, and compare them with the behind the building setup.
So I'm not actually sure what we're doing. This is round robin question time? Or?
Question, I guess discussion or whatever.
I guess I'd like to hear what some of my other colleagues have to say before I weigh in. So
all right. You want to pass? Yeah,
I'll come back. I'm not giving up my right to speak entirely.
You need to buy a vote.
Okay. We need to change status quo. Period, flat out, do haste, his favorite expression. The status quo is not acceptable. When people are in solitary, if people haven't been up there, they're aligned on either side of a long hall. The deputy is sitting at a station at the end of the hall looking at a monitor with appropriately placed little post-it notes to cover up areas that should be private. And every 15 minutes they walk up and down the hallway and peek in the window to make sure that things are still okay. And that's like the bulk of the human contact that these people get. That's not acceptable. We have to change that as fast as we can. As far as what you almost have to call penalizing the company, to put them to this extra work is not something, it's not a result of an error they made. It's a result of something that happened, and I don't know what happened. I'd like to know what happened to change where the building went from as designed to as built. I'd like to know what happened in between those two. I'd like to know how that got changed and why. But the fact is it got changed, and it's not the fault of anyone here, including Mead and Hunt. So I'm not going to say that they should be penalized. I might question how much money they make compared to how much most of the rest of us make, but I'm not going to argue that either. I just know we really have to get on with this. We can't. And we need to do it, again, the best possible product is what we need, given consideration for the needs of the people that literally live there. We have to look at it from that human perspective, not just from the numbers perspective. I agree that the Greenfield site would be really difficult unless we know that there is a piece of property near enough to be workable. If that's not the case, you almost may as well not hardly talk about it, because the transportation just becomes impossible. We have a space right now that adjoins the courthouse. We have to have interaction with the courthouse. I think we should keep it, we should use it, we should plan around it the very best way we can, put in the services that we can put in next to the courthouse, things that can appropriately be off-site. We can talk about a green field for the population of folks that don't have to come and go all the time. We would need a medical facility where the bulk of the people are living, but we would also need a clinic at least in other facilities. I'm not certain that we need a full-time second clinic in another facility, but we do need to have services available anywhere and everywhere we have people. We also need to, and one thing that I've said in the discussion leading up to all of this was I would like to see places that are planned for housing right now be planned looking at it with the possibility of converting it into program or therapy space or whatever. So I would like spaces that are convertible from housing if community is able to help us pull numbers down of people that are living there. That's enough.
I'm trying to understand where these options come from, because, right, I could think of all medical and mental health inmates go to a different facility, and that's the fourth option, or that we leave the PSB building and the Ferris Center the same, and 6th and 7th floors going to a greenfield site, and that's a fifth option. And so I'm trying to figure out how the options were decided for the 2016 and 2017 study, and how these were selected now, and are we gonna do another change order in 4 months? Which I know we're not gonna foresee, so we don't have to do some predictions, but I know that's painful to think about. So where do those options come from? Which ones are we missing that are helpful? Which ones would you have liked to see on the table that are not? And that, I think, to the architects and the program managers.
Well, many of the options that we're examining have come from committee and from board members, previous and current, to try to answer all the potential questions that may come up from board members or the county executive, the ultimate decision makers on how and if we proceed on a project. That's where those.
So then are these options 5, 6, and 7 supposed to meet the requirements of the original jail project, but be less than options 1, 2, and 3 from the first jail report? And that's the criteria that brought these to the table?
So I'll jump in there. The first study, which originated in 2012 and was published in 2014, had 6 options, 1 through 6. And those options sort of set the basis for the next 2 studies as we move forward, but the price tag for all of those were $140 to $160 million, and that price point was thought at that time to be too high, and that was the larger program. Now, based on what we know today, I suspect you wouldn't build those for that price point anymore, it would be higher. But, so we got those 6 options, and the estimated cost for them. And while the price point's too high, is there other things that we could do? And so we did another study, which essentially took one of the options and broke it into phases. So you have this master plan, and you have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Option 3 is just one of the first 6 options broken into 3 phases. And what we said was we would build the first option. And because of this reduction in beds of 92, if we got to a point where that wasn't working because we just didn't have enough beds and we were overcrowded or we had to shift, well, then the phase 2 was possible by taking the 2nd floor of the public safety building where our offices are now, the sheriff's offices, and creating bed space there, bringing our bed space back up to what it is today. And then the 3rd phase of that would be to add all what Supervisor Krause was talking about, all that programming and stuff that was reduced. So these options that you just said were 5, 6, and 7 are actually would be 8, 9, and 10, because we already have 7 options before us that we've studied before. So that's 8, 9, and 10 are really a replication of number 7, which is the reduced program. So when we first did the study, the program was this big. We said, okay, let's go on top of the public safety building, and here's the program that we believe will fit there, and it will give us a scaled-down version of everything that we've talked about. And so we're still working on that scaled-down model in these 3 additional venues. And you're right in that we could find more ways to sort of slice those options up and say, well, no, I'd rather look at it this way and this way and this way. But I think that where they come from is, like the sheriff mentioned, the discussions over the last, 6 years of, sometimes at committee, Supervisor Willett would be, well, what about renovating the the city-county building, and what about, and it's just been those discussions that have taken place that sort of formed the basis, I think, for these options that were presented to us. Long-winded answer, but hopefully.
Yeah, so, and a big part of the reason that we're here tonight is because, those 70-some million that went to 150 million, and I think we owed it to committee members, new members on the board, the public, and everybody involved to just say, yeah, we're gonna put on another set of eyes, and we're gonna relook at it. My sense is, that at 150 million, we still have everything we need downtown. We'll take a look at the other options, and it may become very apparent that he's brought up about transporting people, that's just not gonna work. And all the other things that'll come into that discussion, but really, for me, where it goes to is, we've got somebody dead in the jail that hung themselves here not too long ago. Paul's alluded to how horrible it is up there. I've taken a jail tour 3 times now, I think, and it's like getting slapped in the head every time we go up there. And somebody may be in jail that is in there, they're found guilty and maybe they really didn't do it, kind of a thing. There's the folks that are working there. They're victims. I mean, they may suffer from PTSD because somebody commits suicide in their watch and they couldn't get in their cell, or they couldn't get to them, or whatever the case may be. So while we sit here and talk about it, somebody might be planning their own demise. And, if they were in a decent facility that we could provide for them, maybe that wouldn't have to happen. We could prevent that from happening. And we're really blessed living in a community like Dane County where we have so much. And it is our duty as public servants to address the issues and help those that are the most in need, and to spend the tax dollars wisely. And we have passed it at the county board to say that we're going to do all those things. We're going to address PREA. So folks are protected against Prison Rape Elimination Act, that we implement that we can be in compliance with what we're required to be in compliance for, so that our insurance company doesn't dump us at some point. As long as we're moving forward, they'll cover us. But lawsuits are costly. And if you lose a lawsuit, I think I heard a few years ago, an average lawsuit may cost, starting at 13 million if it's a wrongful death. So those are all the things that are in play, and I don't think we have the luxury to keep going back time after time after time. We need to move it along. We spent, $4 million and some just to try to fix some of the broken things up there to keep the old place running while we're talking about the new place, right? The house is burning down, care about the color of the curtains, we need to move, we need to get it done, and that's for all the right reasons. So I think we should take the vote on the change order, and let's get those plans back as quickly as we can and move.
Well, just a sidebar, Public Works and Transportation deals in change orders all the time. In fact, in some meetings, we've had as many as 20 or 25 change orders. Unfortunately, none of them are as challenging as this one, because if they were, I don't think anybody would want to serve on the committee. But that's how I see this. I do see this as, you know, we had this original contract, and obviously, usually with change orders, you get a little further along in the process, though, before they come along. Here, we're still sort of trying to get off square one. And you know, there's lots of reasons why with excavation you get bad soil, or with the biogas facility, with this extreme weather we had last year, that impacted the project. But here we have, you know, we've had a situation where a discovery that we can't build up, a cost that's much higher than we're comfortable with, and the need, as was decided at the meeting that we had in December, I think it was the county executive, his chief of staff, the sheriff, the deputy, county board chair, Supervisor McCarville, and myself as committees involved. Karen Peterson-Thurlow was there, Greg Brockmeyer, and just we talked, well, let's come up with some options as to, because we felt we just needed to get some additional information. That's basically what this is, a request for more information, so you know, we can move on to the next step, so we have the information we need to make an informed decision. You know, figuring that, hoping that this moves forward. You know, once we get the deliverables, Chair Corrigan and I have talked about this, we feel it's important that before it comes back to the committees, that we have a committee of the whole, that the information is presented to the entire board, so everybody is on the same page. Everybody knows what the proposals are, everybody has an opportunity to ask questions and express concerns before it comes back to our respective committees. So, I mean, I do support this. I know it's, you know, it's a challenging environment when you have, we've already approved $76 million for this, and I went back and took a look over the borrowing over the last 10 years, and the average borrowing, capital borrowing, is $47 million a year for the past 10 years. So, and now it looks like 76 million is not going to be enough. So yeah, it's a challenge to look at that big a figure when that's, you know, way above what we normally borrow in a particular year. But so I'm hoping that you'll see the value in moving forward on voting for this change order. And now it's to you, Supervisor Gray.
Thanks. I actually had a couple of just clarifying questions.
Sure, yeah.
And one was, I wanted to confirm that the scope that we had before, it is still on the table. And again, I
Absolutely.
wasn't trying to
Right.
stop other people from talking about the desire for more issues on the scope. I just wanted, so that means that I wanted to confirm that the idea of the space reduction, that is still within the scope. The idea of medical and mental health space. The idea of eliminating isolation and our traditional solitary confinement space. The idea of ensuring in-person visitation along with electronic visitation, and making sure that there is programming space, not enough for Supervisor Krause's ideal, but that all those things that we discussed, they're still here. Is that
Right, because
correct?
the two change orders we have are for additional services. So, yeah, there's.
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay, all those pieces are still
Yeah.
here. And I want to remind everyone, because this was really important to me, there was a accompanying budget amendment when we were voting on the 2018 budget, so in December or November 2017, that when we approved the 76, thank you, $1 million for the jail, we also approved this amendment written by Supervisors Dye, Corrigan, myself, and Sheila, and Supervisor Stubbs, that detailed approval of the jail project is contingent on the following items being included in operating and capital budgets and moving them forward. That includes the mental health facility and including creation of a mental health crisis restoration facility, funding for community-based reentry, funding for bail reform. Anyhow, it goes from A to J. I will not read the whole thing, but that for me, and others on the county board, and Chair Corrigan was the lead sponsor of this amendment, acknowledgement that we need to move all of these things forward at the same time. And for me, I will continue to be looking to ensure that we are moving things forward. And I'm proud of the fact that in the recent budget, PPJ approved, adding the bail monitoring positions, ensuring there was funding for the pretrial assessment, that we have this really great percentage of individuals that are out on bail. Out on signature bond. It was 81%, which is an unprecedented percent. That's still not okay for the 19% that are there with bail and cannot afford it. Still absolutely an issue that we need to address. But I just want to point out that we are working diligently. Agree with Supervisor Rusk, not fast enough. But we are working steadily and diligently on these things. And I intend to hold us accountable for this proposal that we promised, that Chair Corrigan was the lead of, that I know that everyone I've talked to has promised, that we need to simultaneously move these things forward. So that makes me hopeful that all these things move forward at the same time. And then I'll just reiterate that I, like Supervisor, I just want to call you by your first name and not your last name, Rick. Thank you. Supervisor Rick, no respect, just Dave. Supervisor Rick, I appreciate, I am concerned about the greenfield sites. I am concerned that we're not going to find a site that is bus accessible and makes sense. So these aren't sites studies that I'm crazy about. I do appreciate that my colleagues want these studies and need them so that they can move forward with their assessment. I'm not interested in standing in the way of that, but I just want sort of on the record that I'm really concerned about a greenfield site being a good option for the population that we serve and the jail.
So I wanted to wait in because I guess it's really valuable to get all the different perspectives, because what's so important about having committees, everyone does have a different perspective and comes at it from a different angle. And since we have some new people on the board, I'll just briefly touch on what my perspective is. I'm pretty sure I'm the only member of the county board who regularly goes to the jail as part of my day job, and I'm almost certainly I'm the only member of the county board who actually has my own jail number. If you go to the jail enough, they give you a number, and you check in using that number. I actually have a jail number. And so I've been at the jail a number of times, countless times. I've had a meeting with a mentally ill inmate through a food slot at one point because he wouldn't come out of his cell, so we had our client meeting through the food slot. I had another meeting where the only way I was allowed to have the meeting was to have a deputy in the room because there was a fear that my client might attack me during the meeting, and we reached an agreement that the deputy would keep confidential what was said in the meeting, but he had to be there to keep me from potentially being attacked. So I have a perspective. It's not the only perspective. It doesn't mean it's the correct perspective, but it's a different perspective than a lot of folks. I did vote yes on the jail renovation in the 2018 budget. In fact, I supported the Mike Willett amendment, which was an amendment for what was at that point called option 1, which would have provided the programming space that Dorothy Krause is talking about. That would have been in the amendment that Mike Willett supported and that I spoke in favor of. And if you don't remember my speech in favor of the Willett amendment to provide the extra programming space, that was because that was the night when we had protesters disrupting the meeting, and so my speech was actually not audible to anyone in the room. I later went back and watched the video. You could actually hear it on the video because I was speaking right into the microphone, but we did technically vote on it. It got voted down. I think, and I still feel today, that we made a mistake in doing that. I think that what Mike Willett was supporting, what I think Dorothy Krause is supporting as well, was a jail that would have enough space for the programming so that people are able to do something besides just sit in their pod and play cards and that sort of thing, and that means square footage. But we've perhaps crossed that bridge, and that vote's been taken. And I did vote yes on consolidating and renovating the jail at 115 West Doty Street. And as I sit here today, after hearing all the different perspectives, I continue to support consolidating the jail at 115 West Doty Street and renovating the public safety building located at 115 West Doty Street, as well as adding an addition to 115 West Doty Street. That's what I support. But after carefully considering all the different perspectives, I will be voting no on the resolution tonight. I wanted to briefly outline the 3 reasons why I'm going to do so. The first reason is that this resolution reopens the possibility of keeping a jail, or at least part of the jail, located on the 6th and the 7th floors of the city county building. That's option, I don't know, I guess we're not assigning numbers to this anymore, but it's the first option that was done up on the screen, the CCB and PSB renovations. That includes a so-called full renovation of the 6th and 7th floors of the city county building. More than 2 years ago, the county board and the county executive made a commitment to move the jail out of the city county building, quote, with due haste, unquote. And that was in 2016 Res 94 that we approved in June of 2016. And I won't go through all of it because we've been over this a lot, but I will point out that in that resolution, this county board agreed that we would, quote, not to consider extending the life of the city county building jail, but should work towards an exit strategy with due haste. The CCB jail has significant problems, issues, and conditions that threaten the life and safety of those living, working, and volunteering at the facility, end quote. We decided back then that the problems that are in this building directly above us are such that they can't be fixed, that they do pose a life and safety risk, and I'm not willing to go back and renege on that commitment that we made as a county board back in June of 2016 to vacate the 6th and 7th floors of the jail in this building. Instead, what's before us tonight is a resolution to set up yet another study of an option staying in the CCB jail that's already been studied and already has been rejected. So that's the first reason why, because we're going back to this city county building option, which we've already looked at, and we already, as a board, as a resolution, said we were not going to do. The second reason for opposing this resolution is it does not have any indication, either in the resolution itself or any of the questions that we asked, of where this greenfield site might be. And I am not comfortable spending $186 million of taxpayer money on planning for a greenfield site unless there's some indication of where this greenfield site might be. I do know one site that it's not going to be, or one place it's not going to be, and that's in the town of Westport. There's back and forth about that quite a bit a couple years ago when I brought this up. Obviously, I'm adamantly opposed to a jail being built in Westport, and we won't go through that, other than to mention that the county executive wrote me a letter on February 13th, 2017. It's my birthday. The best birthday present I ever got was that letter dated February 13th of 2017, where the county executive wrote, quote, "So let me be clear, there isn't going to be a jail in Westport," end quote. So there is a written commitment from the county executive that there isn't going to be a jail in Westport. And that's a direct quote from the county executive. And by the way, I'm extremely thankful to the county executive for making that commitment because I think Westport would be a completely inappropriate place for a jail. So the question remains where else that greenfield site would be. I'm not going to go through the speculating of what would be the possible sites. I could do that, but I don't think that's productive right now. I do think, though, we should have some idea of where the site or possible sites would be before we commit to spending $186,000 of taxpayer money studying it. And if there hasn't been any consideration given by the consultants or the sheriff's office or the county executive staff of where this greenfield site might be, then I think it is in fact premature because we should think this through before we go any further. And I think the sites should be publicly identified so they can have a debate about what site, other than of course Westport, which has been ruled out, where this greenfield site may be. And the third reason, perhaps the most important reason why I oppose this, is that a greenfield jail is simply a bad idea. The downtown jail, where the jail has been, for the entire existence of Dane County, we've had a jail downtown. It's located next door to the courthouse. It's on all the major bus routes. It's near the social services such as the county's homeless day shelter. And a greenfield jail would be by definition in an isolated location. It likely would be accessible only by automobile. It would be difficult to get inmates back and forth to court hearings. I know from my own personal experience, working as a lawyer in the courthouse, that simply getting an inmate moved from across the street over to the courthouse is surprisingly difficult. And there's nothing that gets the bailiffs more angry, I've learned, than to surprise them with saying we need someone brought over when they weren't planning on it. I've learned from experience, trying never to do that if you can possibly do it. And I'm not criticizing the sheriff's office. It's just complicated because you have to have two people and there's safety issues, and it's just difficult. It's going to be far more difficult when now there's a van or bus ride of who knows how many miles to get back and forth to the courthouse. And then you have inmates who are at the courthouse for extended periods of time. They may have medical needs, they may have whatever going on, but then they're at the courthouse, and it's going to be logistically, I think, really unworkable. And it would be difficult for inmates' family members to have in-person visits with their loved ones, and this issue of in-person visitation is something this board has repeatedly emphasized is of great importance to this board. That will be very difficult if people are at a greenfield jail that can only be reached by automobile. And I do believe the efficiencies of consolidating all the jail activities under one roof, which is why I so strongly support consolidating our jail at 115 West Doty Street, having everyone in the same building, everyone under one roof, not spread among 3 different buildings as they are now. All those efficiencies would be lost if some people are downtown and other people are at a greenfield jail site miles away out in the countryside. So I come to the same conclusion that Supervisor Heidi Wegner, I think, is getting at to vote no, but for completely different reasons we reached the same conclusion. I think we should recommit to making it happen at 115 West Doty Street. I have never throughout this entire process said to anyone that this jail renovation is going to be inexpensive. It is going to be expensive, and I don't know that there's a way to not have it be expensive. But I do feel that the greenfield jail option is ultimately going to be a dead end, and so I would ask for a roll call, and I'm planning to vote no on the roll call. Thank you.
Other, yes, Supervisor Bradford.
So Supervisor Kiefer, just to be clear, you want the South Tower addition option? Is that what you're stating?
That is what I would support, correct, since the building on top of the roof option is not viable anymore. You're at the South Tower at this point.
I just have a question. So I had asked earlier, what happens if we vote no? But is it on the table to explore other alternatives at this point, given that there are reasons for, not doing some of these for reasons or another across the board? What Supervisor Danner brought up about potentially other options we could look into. That's not part of this proposed project phase, right? These are the only alternatives we're planning to explore and provide details on, not additional options that could meet other criteria that other supervisors have brought up today, right?
Well, right, because the letter from Mead & Hunt is in response to the 3 options that were presented to them, so that's what they based their bid on. So anything beyond that will require a reworked change order or this one or an additional one. So yeah, what's before us now is the 3 options that have been discussed earlier and were presented in the PowerPoint.
Can we just go back to the slide where you had the criteria that we're going to see across the options?
Yes, would you mind?
Yeah, so you had mentioned some kind of grid summarizing across all 3 alternatives and details around these.
Yeah,
Are there
that's these
additional
2 items.
Yeah, are there additional considerations that you would include as part of that report? Some of the things brought up here and historically that we've tried to explore. Is there anything additional to this list that would be part of that deliverable?
Yeah, the narrative. Yeah. Did I leave that off? Yes, I did.
Yeah, the narrative will have a lot of what has been discussed about, because, I mean, you have transportation issues with some, opposition don't have transportation issues, I mean, so the narrative will talk about, well, with this one, all of those things.
The pluses that one provides and the negatives.
Yeah, just a comment, and I don't know if the sheriff, do you still have all of the studies out on the website or just the most
Yes.
recent one? They're all out there? So if you wanted like more detail of what's happened through the years and with previous options that may answer questions that you have that, as being on the board, a lot of us have already had answered.
There's about 1,800 pages if you want to
Yeah.
get through it tomorrow.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of those. So, as a lot of other people have too. So, you'll find a lot of information there, and then you'll have a lot of aha moments, that sort of thing, and it'll kind of get you to how we got here. So
I'm
that-
sure there's been a lot of research. I'm not trying to dig up, all of that great work that's already been done. I just want to understand what we can consider that people are having a hard time letting go of, and if we can understand how these alternatives are meeting the needs for now that we've gotten here to look at. I just want to understand what this is going to deliver on top of the work that's already been done, not trying to recreate or duplicate any additional work.
Supervisor Crowley?
Assuming this gets a yes vote tonight, when does this go to full board?
March, first meeting in March, I believe. 7th?
Maybe, I would think it would be the March 7th, because March 7th meeting. I mean, I think just for timeliness, I'm sure Chair Corrigan wants to move this along as quickly as possible, so it makes sense to have it at the next meeting.
My suggestion would be, if we can say yes tonight, with knowing that these guys and others are gonna get their heads together between now and then, and anticipate the likelihood of a sub coming up before the full board to consider, that might adjust the number for different considerations that these guys would. So we can say yes to this, anticipating that there would be a sub for the full board. That way we could keep moving it along, but with the knowledge that things are likely to change between now and then.
Being a sub offered at the meeting, at the March 7th meeting? or-
Correct. And that would go through personnel and finance and executive probably on its way.
Well, not really, but can I ask a question about that? So would the sub be to add more to the scope of work or to change the options?
That would be what you guys would come up with as a result of this discussion tonight, as well as thoughts that you have, ways to add or subtract, or I can't know that.
Supervisor Keeper?
So, I don't agree with that approach. It's our job as committee members, we're the members of the board, we're the ones who actually write the resolutions. We can't basically tell other people to write resolutions for us. If there's a sub, if someone on this committee wants to do a sub, now would be the time to introduce the sub. I mean, we're in the committee meeting right now. If someone wants to amend it, if you want to amend it, now's the time to amend it. You're the board member, so I guess theoretically I'm supposed to address my remarks to the chair, but I think if there's a member of the board that wants to do a sub, now would be the time to do a sub. I don't think it's right to say to other people, go
I'm not
write a sub
understanding how
first.
that would work either,
Yeah.
unless it came through committees, so.
I mean, I don't know, Carlos, can I know that?
And so, because this is a change order that is based upon a negotiated agreement between the vendor and the county, I think a sub it can't be entered into without having to go back and basically renegotiate that agreement. So essentially, if you're looking to change the scope of it, the best you can do is sort of vote it down, and then that would signal to the department, to the sheriff's office, that, well, the board or the committee is not in favor of this, therefore we need to try some other options. And you could, in your vote, you can signal what you're looking for, but introducing a sub without having the parties be able to negotiate is not going to be able to be.
Wait, I have a question. Yes. I have a question for Core Counsel. So are you saying that the text of 2018 Res 530 is non-amendable? The actual resolution, you're saying it's a non-amendable document?
If it becomes a material change to what Mead and Hunt is able to study, if it's going to require additional work or less work, then it has to go back to be renegotiated. It's basically like a contract amendment is what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I get the point that Mead and Hunt may say, if we add stuff to it, they may say we don't want to do it for 186,000. But are you saying that anything in here we're not allowed to change any of this wording, that we're not allowed to amend this document, this resolution?
Not anything. I mean, obviously,
Okay.
I'm talking about the terms of the agreement. You wouldn't be able to
Okay.
change.
Yeah, I guess anything that would impact the bottom line, the dollar amount.
Yeah.
Anything that would add to the cost.
But there'd be nothing to prevent us as a board from changing it, and then either Mead and Hunt says no thanks, or Mead and Hunt says okay, right?
If you were to change the resolution, then the resolution won't match what the contract amendment change order says. They won't work together. So it would be more of like an academic exercise in that case, because it won't match.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm voting no on it anyway, so. Supervisor Radcliffe?
I'm going to be voting yes to it because even though previously the board voted for the jail to be at 115 West Doty Street, it was also voted to spend the $76 million, and that isn't an option now in either case. And with the South Tower being about $140 to $150 million, I think it's good to know the amounts of the other options at this point so that we can make a better decision. So I'll be voting yes.
Anyone else, or, yes, Supervisor?
Just a couple more questions. In one of the options, we talked about selling or repurposing the PSB. Are we going to be including the cost of reconstructing the PSB in order to make that sellable or reusable? If not, can we?
That's not part of the scope now. The scope now says that the county will determine the value of the public safety building, but there's no vision of what it would be. So it'd be pretty difficult for them to estimate. If it was going to stay in county hands, I'm sort of assuming that's what you mean, if it was repurposed.
I mean, obviously that space has to be
Right.
exist as it is, so that's going to be a
Right.
large construction cost.
Yeah.
So that can't be included in the study, or won't be, any kind of ballpark.
Well, it's not in the scope now, so it would be a change of contract.
And my other question that you're probably not gonna like, any idea, I mean, guess that obviously we're not gonna hold you to, do you think any of the other three options that we're pursuing will come in under 150? I'm having a trouble foreseeing that as a
I don't know, I said
realistic
22 acres
option.
before and I got held to that, so.
Be careful, that's careful to say.
Don't get
Yeah, I guess that's really the purpose of the study. I don't have a good feel for that right now.
Further questions? Further discussion? Yes.
Say I'm gonna vote for this to get it, we need to get this done as fast as possible. But I personally really think that we're wasting money on the greenfield, on the full build out on the greenfield. I just don't see how it's gonna work without costing buku bucks in the future, every year. So I think that option is kind of a waste of time and money, unfortunately, probably voting for is the way to get this moving faster. So I'm getting old, I can't wait too much longer for this.
So you're not gonna rob any banks until we got a nice spot to put you?
I can't do anything like that anymore, I can't run fast enough. That'd be good.
Anyone else? Supervisor?
I'm just gonna say, once again, I'm going to say yes, but I still want to give people maximum flexibility to get it done right. Even if the paper says you're supposed to do it this way, if you've got a better idea, I'd love to hear it.
Well, we're certainly gonna, as we get into the more detailed parts of the study, we're certainly gonna look at other variations on that particular option. We've already started to think about some of those sort of, if you do it this way, it may impact it this way, so you may want to relook at it and do it this way. So I think within the context of the narrative, you're going to see some nuances that'll be presented to help you better sort of evaluate and assess each of these options. That'll help you make a better decision ultimately.
Thank you.
A lot of those decisions are based upon NIC standards and best practices and current trends and correction.
So are we ready to vote? Sounds like. I just wanted to say that I appreciate this combined meeting because I think it's been good for the Public Works members to get the PPJ perspective. You've had this issue for a lot longer than we have. You had the sort of the initial part of it. Now that we're trying to get to the bricks and mortar, it's for us. So it was very helpful to hear the discussion throughout the evening. Give a clear perspective as to where we were coming from and where we hope to go. So, let's see, do we have a clerk to call the roll, or should we just?
Well, maybe we should go by committee, and
Yeah.
the way Supervisor Keeper
I mean, ask
asked
for
for
a
roll
roll
call.
call, so I guess I'll just, Radcliffe,
Yes.
Rip,
Aye.
Peter? No. And Nelson, aye. So,
Okay.
3-1 Public Works.
Supervisor West?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Yes. I'm yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so, I guess, let's see, where the agenda? Yeah, future meeting items and day, we will be meeting again at 6 o'clock. Are we going to just go to separate? Do you think we'll go to separate committees once?
I don't know, we should probably talk to the chair about that.
Yeah,
and just
okay,
see
we'll
if
do
she
that,
thinks
yeah.
there's a protocol we need to follow.
Yeah.
Committee.
Well, that would be committee of the whole will be next, but then it would be on that, and it goes back to the committees before.
The Public Works is meeting next Tuesday, right?
Public comment of items are on the agenda. Are there such other businesses allowed by law?
Just a reminder that it is Supervisor Baird's birthday tomorrow. Again, happy birthday.
Should we sing? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Carousel. Happy birthday to you. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Move to adjourn.
So that was on the record.